knowledgeable about CWD. I know a lot about it, but there are some people that are experts, not only in the Department of Natural Resources and some of our other positions, but across in the Midwest that we do collaboration with. So thanks for coming. Appreciate your time on this. We give this program, like somebody was asking, in different parts of Iowa, and we hope that not only will you gain knowledge, but you'll also be able to share some of this information with others that you have conversations with. And obviously you're interested in deer as you're coming to this type of a presentation. I have a lot of information, probably like an hour's worth of information that I'm going to try to cut down to 45 minutes, so I'll kind of skip through some things to make sure that we have at least 15 minutes for questions and answers at the end, and I most certainly will hang out after 12:30 if you've got some other things that you want to talk about. So we'll get right into it. Topics for this type of presentation, what we're going to talk about, some general information about what chronic wasting disease is, some information about our neighboring states, and then where our Iowa, what we call CWD surveillance program, that's a monitoring, looking for this disease, and where we've had positive locations of deer in Iowa up to this point, and how can you help us manage your deer herd. And I'm always reminded that this is the public's deer herd. We're the managers of this resource, and we want to do the best we can involving the public with that management. And like I said, there'll be time for questions and answers. So what is CWD? It's a slowly progressive brain disease of cervids. When I say the cervid, that's the deer family, including white-tailed deer, mule deer, elk, reindeer, and moose. And every time I give this program, when I say that word reindeer, it reminds me that Norway has chronic wasting disease in Norway. And they had it in a reindeer herd, and they had seen what happened in the United States in different places in there, and they knew they had the opportunity to eliminate that disease out of that whole herd. So they shot, I believe it was, I don't want to quote the numbers, a lot of reindeer because they're herding animals, and they were able to shoot the whole herd down. They allowed hunters to do that first, test their animals before they processed and consumed, but they wanted to try to eliminate that disease from getting started. They were able to take that whole herd out. They'll wait 5 years and allow others to come back into that area to repopulate it, hopefully without chronic wasting disease. So it's not just something in Iowa or the Midwest.
Does that include caribou?
Yes, caribou and reindeer, very similar, just as far as one's domestic, one's not, and stuff there. Hello, how are we doing? Just getting started, so we haven't missed much. And also moose, but moose do not contract the disease as easily as white-tailed deer. It belongs to the family of diseases known as, and I'll probably only say this once, transmissible spongiform encephalopathies. We'll call them TSEs for the rest of today. Or it's a prion disease. It's not caused by a virus, a fungus, or a bacteria. That makes this a very difficult disease to deal with. It's transmitted by a misshapen host protein called a prion. Other TSEs include scrapie. You've probably heard of scrapie in sheep. BSE, that would be your bovine spongiform encephalopathy, or your mad cow disease would be that was found in cattle. And then Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. And that cattle, BSE, mad cow was in the UK, was not in the United States there. And also Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease is one that can occur in humans. So what we know about CWD, it's spread directly animal to animal, but another problem with this disease, it can be transmitted from the environment, from the soil. The prions can be left in the soil and can be picked up from the wildlife or the deer family then and contracted. Early detection looks for this prion accumulation in the retropharyngeal lymph nodes. Those would be these two glands right underneath your jaw. Like when you have a sore throat and the doctor's feeling your glands, those are lymph nodes right here, and those are the ones that we sample to be able to check for that accumulation of those prions. For quite some time, we were taking not only the prion or the lymph nodes, but also the brain stem, which is also a place of early detection. Both of those were taken for quite some time until it was determined this would be the first place of accumulation. That helped tremendously as far as us taking samples out in the field, not to have to go into the spine, release the spinal fluid, and it takes longer to get that sample out. So now it's fairly quick and easy to be able to take these two glands right out of the neck. Another problem with the disease, it averages 16 months or more, up to 3 years from exposure to actually showing clinical signs, of the disease. So the deer will have the disease and they may look like totally healthy animals. The shedding of the prions can be in the feces, the urine, saliva, still in this preclinical, in these stages early there too. The prions have been found in muscle tissue and also in antler development. That's in the soft tissue when there's blood supply to the antlers. Once it's hard bone, nothing associated with prions as far as the hard antler. These prions can be infectious in the environment for years. And what we've learned from scrapie, it can be 10 years, 15 years, where some of those pens with scrapie were removed of animals from there. 15 years later, put animals in there and they developed scrapie from that in the environment. So we don't know how long those prions might be able to last in the environment. And also I'm reminded that when it's found also in the soil, there's a study that shows it can be uptake into plants. So plants can actually pick up the prions, go up into the plant. The animal could consume the plants and get the prions that way. So we're talking about something kind of nasty out there as far as a disease that goes and how to stop or slow it. It's only known in the cervids, that's this deer family, for chronic wasting disease, and there's no evidence of transmission to other wild mammals or humans at this time. I mentioned this average 16 months to 3 years from exposure to clinical disease. 44 out of the 46 positives we've had are healthy-looking deer. They show no signs of anything besides a healthy-looking deer for those that we've taken up to this point. That's a good thing, showing that we're at early onset of the disease, and it's not really well established in the population at this time. We finally picked up 2 that had something abnormal to them, but we're not ready to claim that they were symptoms of CWD. We believe one was hit with an arrow and was injured and was affecting its condition at that time, so it was getting skinny and looked like it could have some symptoms of CWD, but we're not willing to say that on that one. And the other one had abscessational infection of antlers when the bucks fight, and they sometimes will poke the other deer in the head and the skin, and it can create an infection on the head, and it had a lot of that infection from that fighting, which took the animal down, as far as condition there too. So those things were maybe not related, or they could be related, something about with the disease. But anyway, 44 looked absolutely healthy. Clinical signs, so what are we looking for? Well, one, I mentioned there may be no signs whatsoever when we look at the animal itself. But things that we would see as this disease progresses is that progressive weight loss, losing body mass, increased drinking, increased urination, excessive salivation, so they could be drooling, ears down, drooping, decreased social interaction. So there'll be some behavioral changes where they may separate themselves from other deer, and they also may lose awareness around them from humans or vehicles or anything at that time. And then aspiration pneumonia may occur. So new information that came out in 2017 threw up a little bit of a red flag for us to be even more concerned about chronic wasting disease. There's a study going on in Canada of taking macaque monkeys, and they were subjected to CWD material in different fashions. So some of it's abnormal by directly injecting it into the brain, something that wouldn't occur out in the environment. But what concerns us is that 5 of them actually became infected with CWD, these macaque monkeys. 2 were injection into the brain. 1 was oral infected brain material that was, it was brain material, eating brain material, which isn't normal, stuff there too. But 2 of them were oral infected muscle tissue. So muscle tissue was applied and consumed by the macaque monkeys and became positive by that material. Now, I want to tell you that the study's ongoing, but they thought it was important enough halfway through the study to put some information out there, and also that This study will be completed, peer-reviewed by scientists, and also then probably replicated. So this is just something to keep your eyes on, as you hear information about chronic wasting disease. So this prompted the Center for Disease Control to actually change their wording for cautions for humans. And instead of, we suggest you test your animals, they strongly urge you to test your animals. If you're in an area with chronic wasting disease and you're hunting animals in there, before you process and consume, they talk to you about, as far as recommend that you test the animals before that consumption. And they've always stuck with the line, never consume an animal that has tested positive for a TSE, including CWD. Now I'm going to digress just a little bit. How many have heard about blue tongue disease in deer? EHD, hemorrhagic disease, HD. That's another different type of disease. And as I travel the state, people get those two mixed up sometimes. So I'm going to go through just a few little symptoms and things that we look about for the difference of these two. And in the shortness of time, I've just kind of highlighted some red ones. So the transmission is a biting gnat, and actually a midge. During drought conditions in Iowa, especially southern Iowa, because we're drier down there a lot of times, and when we have drought conditions, these midges can proliferate in these mudflat and shallow ponds, and as deer are going there because it's hot and it's droughty to drink, the midges can infect from deer to deer to deer this hemorrhagic disease. But as we mentioned, in CWD, the contact is deer to deer and from the environment, not from an insect. Also, in hemorrhagic disease, it's non-discriminatory. Bucks, does, fawns, doesn't matter. If they get bit, they can become infected. But in CWD, we're finding that old bucks have a higher infection rate for chronic wasting disease, because think about the interaction of male deer. One, they're in bachelor groups of males during the summertime, so they're interacting right now with several males. So if one's infected, there's licking, there's touching, there's interaction going on, that there could be transmission there. Then when they separate out, they also then will interact with these does during the rut and the breeding time, and a lot of different family groups, because they're finding any doe that's receptive and moving quite some distances so they can infect other groups. So they are more mobile and more interactive possibility of getting the disease, and then also that they're older, that it gives them a possibility of having the disease. This is something when we get a call on a dead deer on somebody's farm and said, got any idea what happened here? This is the main thing that we're looking for, is death usually occurs in days on hemorrhagic disease, blue tongue. So when they die, they're in very good body condition. The mass, the muscle, they're very healthy looking besides being dead. And they're usually found near water because they become hemorrhagic. It hemorrhages, the blood vessels hemorrhage in the body, and they're feverish, and so they go to water. Creeks, ponds, rivers. So a lot of times we'll get that indication that I have a really big buck and he's dead in my pond, but if his body health is really good, we're not suspicious of chronic wasting disease. Chronic wasting disease, it incubates for a couple years there before symptoms, but eventually they just waste away and die, skin and bones. So that's a symbol that you'd be looking for when you found a dead deer with CWD in the future. The outbreaks are sporadic with hemorrhagic disease. Some years during drought, there can be a lot of places, and sometimes if it's been a cool, moist year with a lot of good water in the ponds, we don't see much hemorrhagic disease. But in chronic wasting disease, the outbreaks are increasing. Nowhere in the United States is that where chronic wasting disease has got a foothold and started, has it gotten any better. It's just spreading and getting worse in those areas. So we're not seeing a sporadic population change. So we don't really know what our long-term effect is going to be, but we have a lot of different biologists studying this in not only the Midwest, but the world. One last thing on hemorrhagic disease before I go back to chronic wasting disease is this is where our outlook was last year. We had a pocket of drought. We know that there was a drought in the last couple rows of counties in southern Iowa, but it affected this corner of Iowa more, so we had a lot more reports. Obviously, there's more deer affected than what we hear from reports of ones that are out there that nobody ever comes across. But this is a good indicator when people are calling us and saying, I'm finding dead deer, in a pond and during this drought times, that we monitor this of the numbers, and if possible, be able to take a sample. If it's fresh enough, we can take a sample to tell which type of strain it is. But anyway, that's where we had it in Iowa, and as you see, we had no reports, but it was back probably about 6-7 years ago, we had reports of hemorrhagic disease even in northeast Iowa. Back to CWD. This is the latest updated map from this summer of where chronic waste and disease is in North America. But I think it was before 1980, it was virtually confined in this region out here. And obviously these animals just didn't travel all to these places, but we see different types of movement of the disease. The dotted places are captive facilities. So they could be breeding facilities or hunting preserves where they have captive deer and they're probably selling and moving those across from place to place. The DNR is not here to point fingers at the captive industry. We're not here to point fingers of the hunters that hunted out west and brought maybe a carcass back to Wisconsin and put it on the ground, and then it moved CWD there. But what we're here is that we all have to work on this together, that we all put all of our resources together to stop or slow this disease as much as we can. I'll come back to the Midwest and look at some things more closely around Iowa. Who heard of CWD in Wisconsin? Big story. When it hit Wisconsin, I'll tell you what, it was like a bomb went off in Wisconsin. There's a lot of deer hunters, a lot of good deer hunting there, and it hit them by surprise, like I said, because out west is where it was normally found, and all of a sudden they found it in 2001, was their first positive samples, that they had 3 positives right here. I'm going to go through a sequence of slides showing you not only, Audience, can you please take your phones off so we're not disturbing them? So I'm going to go through a sequence of slides of each year what they found for CWD in Wisconsin from 2001, 2002. Okay, 2001 they did 1,092 samples, so they picked up 3. Then they did 40,000 samples looking and scanning for what they had going on there, and they found 205 that next year. And then this is 2003, 2004. So this map here is accumulation from the first year to every year. This is each individual year where they found positives. 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. They're up to 339 positives in a year. 13, 14, 15. As you can see, not only is the core growing here, but there's movement and outside of this area too, and some new samples that are out in new areas. 16, 17. 600 positives is what they had in 2017 in Wisconsin. And some people say CWD's been here forever. This is showing that there's a core area and less outside. We would have found dead animals, there was CWD, if this was here in the 60s and the 50s and the 40s. We would have known that from having these dead animals that were wasting away. So anyway, that kind of shows you that core in those areas. Harper's Ferry was where we had our first positive, and I put these X's up here in relationship to where these positives are in Wisconsin. We'll never know, was it a deer that come across the river? Was it a captive animal? Was it a hunter who brought a carcass back to Iowa? But this was just about 1 mile, 1.5 miles from the Mississippi River near Harper's Ferry, near Yellow River Forest. And this is Elkader, where we've got positives, and this is Dubuque. The next 2 slides are the most important 2 slides I have in my whole program. These are information from Wisconsin. This is Iowa County, Wisconsin, not in Iowa. This is Iowa County, Wisconsin. This is the worst of the worst for CWD in Wisconsin. These are male deer. The things you just need to look at is the red circles. When a male deer is 1.5 years old, 15% of them are positive with chronic wasting disease. When they get to be 3.5 years old, 1/3 of them are positive with CWD. When they get to be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, you flip a coin to see if you've shot a buck, if it's positive with CWD in that worst of the worst area in Wisconsin. A lot of people say, Wisconsin failed. They tried to annihilate all the deer and everything. We do not disagree with what Wisconsin tried to do once they found that disease, because they had to do their very best to stop it. Those of us in Iowa would appreciate them doing everything they can not to let deer come to Iowa that are positive. So those critics of the DNR in Wisconsin, that they didn't know what they're doing, they were just dealt a bad hand. That was there probably for 10, 15, maybe 20 years before they picked up that positive, and then you could see how that expansion has occurred. So 50%. This is what we're trying to prevent in Iowa. This is the same information. This is adult bucks. You know, we talked about them being more likely to be positive. Adult females, and then yearling bucks and does. 2002 to 2016. Does anybody see any indication that this is getting better? Is it even leveling off anything? We'll be able to watch Wisconsin. Unfortunately, it's so close to Iowa, to see where this goes from now. But when you hit bucks, males at 50% and females at 23, 24% in through there, 2 studies are showing that there's actually 10% mortality loss in your population due to chronic wasting disease. So that adds into hunting, road kills, coyotes, all the other things. You add 10% more mortality. So what you have to do is either start manipulating your doe licenses to help to artificially hold your population up, because otherwise this population eventually will start going down. As we've seen in a study on mule deer population out west, as the prevalence rate, the percent of deer getting positive goes up, their population's going down. It's an isolated population, so they can monitor those numbers. Wisconsin, Iowa, you know, we've got deer intermingling, and it's hard to figure out exactly what percentages are dying from that, but it's easier in an isolated population. I told you I'd come back to the Midwest on this map. And in 2016, 2017, 3 things kind of really caught our attention was new positives close to Iowa. We had southeast Minnesota, we had some positives in Missouri, and we had positives in Nebraska knocking on our door right on our borders. And so we increased surveillance along the Missouri River and some more on southern Iowa against Missouri, even though this, I'll come back to that. And then also in Minnesota, my place is right here. I'm feeling like I'm getting kind of squeezed by CWD in northeast Iowa right now. Let's see, what else was I going to say here? Okay, so other things, we had 4 captive facilities with positives for CWD. The first positive we had in Iowa of anything was a hunting preserve in Davis County, southern Iowa. It was traced back that an animal came from a breeding facility up in Cerro Gordo County. So this breeding facility was sending male deer down to here as a hunting preserve. Tracebacks took this facility there, had sold animals to this facility, and this guy, he was interested and curious as what his herd was, so he sampled some of his and found a positive in his herd in Pottawatomie County. And then also we had a captive facility, a small one of a farming situation with some farmed deer, and it was a very small one, but had a positive, then they had a second one, then they depopulated and found a 3rd one in that. But they have depopulated, you know, that there too. So that's the captive facility positives there too. This map shows where our positives are in Iowa with the red triangles, and I'll zoom in and we'll show you some more stuff in there. But here are also positives from neighboring states. So we have Minnesota, 4 miles from Iowa, This one 2 miles from northeast corner up by New Albin by the Mississippi River, here in Wisconsin, and right out across the river from Dubuque. There's a positive, Missouri, and Nebraska. We kind of feel like we're in a little turret, you know, there, and just kind of looking all around and keep your deer on that side. But we're all in this together. Yeah. So here was the closest positives for Missouri. The green line is our Iowa-Missouri border. 50 miles is the closest from there. So not feeling real confident that this positive we had would be associated with that. Feasible, but wasn't anything closer. And then after the fact, after we had a positive here, Missouri has one a few miles, 4 miles I believe it is, from Iowa border. So here's what we have in Wayne County in that southern Iowa. Our first positive was here, close to a town called Seymour. This is Corydon, for any of you who are familiar with southern Iowa. The one positive in Missouri. And we had 4 new positives in Wayne County this last year down in that county. And they were all close to Corydon. This is kind of a busy map, but what I wanted to show you is just remind me of Minnesota. And the red line is the boundary between Iowa and Minnesota. And this is their positives, close to Preston, this area here, and some of their other positives. And this one is 4 miles from the Iowa border. And like I said, I live right about here. And again, a busy map, but what I wanted to show you is they had, they have radio collars on deer so they can track them. These aren't infected deer that they know of, but they could be. They're intermingling in the zone of positive CWD animals. One surprise was a yearling doe. Yearling males will make some dispersal movements that we do know fairly frequently. That's the mechanism of preventing inbreeding and moving to new locations. But a juvenile female went 37 miles from where she was collared at to spend her summer home range at. And that was quite a bit until they showed us this one right here, 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 here. 76 miles, I believe, that yearling female traveled. So you can see the potential problems with movement of this disease, not even human affected, that just movements of deer, of what they can do and move. And also, some of these are in Iowa. You know, there we've picked up some trail camera pictures of some of them and had conversations with the landowners, you know, seeing these deer, and with Minnesota. History of our monitoring that we've done is this is where we've taken samples since 2002. And when Wisconsin had their positive, we had great leadership in Dale Garner, who was the bureau chief of the Wildlife Bureau and the DNR. Expert in diseases, and he said we needed to be doing our surveillance and monitoring, looking for this disease. Obviously, we're looking closer to where we most likely find it from Wisconsin than when we had Missouri and the captive facilities here, and now we're steadily testing heavily along the Missouri River. But we've done 74,000 samples. I tell hunters when they go to bed at night, they see that great big buck going over the hill. I see a lymph node or there when I go to bed at night and stuff there and dissecting. I enjoy my job. And then we also test the hunting preserves when deer come out of their hoofs up. And remember, the only test is a dead test. There's not an effective live test yet, even though they're getting closer to that to be able to test an animal live. It's got to be a dead animal to be able to check at this point. Here's what we call our surveillance target for quotas of how many samples we want to try to get in Iowa. And you can see we're concentrated along the Mississippi River, southern Iowa, Missouri, and then around the captive facility areas. We're taking extra samples around there, and then where we've had the positives. So that's zooming into northeast Iowa, where in our CWD zone we're taking 400 samples just in that area itself, and then 150 for the rest of Alameda, 200, 150. All of the rest of Iowa, of these excluding these areas of concern, get 15 samples minimum all across to every county. So we're doing light surveillance over all of those low-risk type areas. We do it from roadkill deer or harvested deer or target deer. Sometimes they're a sick-looking deer that just died or we have to put it down. But we do roadkills there too. Especially our technicians, we're carrying, and biologists carry a kit with them in their vehicle. And if they see a roadkill, that they can take those samples and get those throughout the year. Each year we revisit what areas, and so we've got more positives in Wayne down here, so we moved up and increased the numbers of samples and adjusted all of those counties. There are how many samples we want in those areas to get a good scientific number. So I have this up here too, is the next slides are where our first positive occurred in Alameda County. So this will be the area that I'll zoom into, and remember, the top of this zone is not the top of Iowa, so there's still from Lansing to New Albany, there's still an area up there without CWD that we know of. So this is that area of 400 samples that we're taking in. And then we had 3 positives the next year after our first one. Then we had 2. Then we had 12, 11 in Alameda County, and 1 new one in Clayton County that started a new spot in Clayton County. Dispersal, possibly. Deer coming across from Wisconsin, possibly. Deer hunter carcass, possibly. Captive facility, there used to be one in that region, possibly. We'll never know on that, but it's focused our attention into that area. Then the next year, this last year, we had 8 in Alameda County, 1, or nope, this wasn't last year, the year before, 1 more in Clayton, and then we picked up our first one in Wayne County that year in 2017. So last year, we had 9 Alameda County, 4 more in Clayton. The green ones are Clayton counties. And as you probably heard on the news, a new positive in Dubuque County, 2.5 miles from the city of Dubuque. Roadkill deer, first one that we've picked up that was a roadkill positive CWD animal. When we do a roadkill sample, we pull the deer down, we do a GPS location of where it's at. When it came back positive, we were able to recover the animal and get it buried in a landfill, there to get it off of the landscape right away. I don't know if our efforts are why we're seeing something a little bit unusual in Alameda County, but in other places, when you have 1, you find 1, 3, 2, 11, that should be going exponential, like 20, 25, 50, growing. We initiated some special collecting, some extra, you call it a season, but it wasn't a season. We had collecting permits, didn't cost the hunters anything, and we applied that to where we had our first positives in here, and both lowering the population some, right where those positives are, and also eliminating some positive animals from that or the other seasons that we had, did exactly what we're trying to do, is buy us some time, slow the disease down. We don't think we can stop this disease, but slow it down such that science can catch up and give us something better to work with than what we have right now. So you don't want really high deer densities when you have a disease starting, because, like you say, deer to deer or from the environment. So next year maybe we'll hit 60 up there, who knows. But there's something there that maybe we, and the other part is we had Yellow River State Forest, public land, had access of people to come into there to be able to effectively maybe do some things. But yet when it gets into private land and people are artificially having really high deer populations, that's where we might see this thing really explode, kind of like Wisconsin, and take off on us. So we work with hunters and landowners of giving the best guidance to not have excess deer on your property. Try to rotate your population so you remove old animals that may be positive, infecting. Let's just say a doe's 4.5 years old and she's positive. When she has twins, they're going to be positive, there. And those are going to infect the next ones that they have. So remove these old animals that may be positive and let the young females be your population source, to having fawns to keep your population there too. So there's some things that we work on with that. And I'll show you some other things you can do. Wayne County, like I mentioned, we had 1, then we had 4 last year. And Dubuque, there's the city of Dubuque, and where the positive was, half mile from the Mississippi River. Here's the positives with Wisconsin, like I showed you where those 3 positives are Iowa. This was just, all the red are positive from 2018, just in Wisconsin in 1 year. And that's, you can see how that's dotting all around Iowa. And I didn't like to see this one right here, right in that corner, both for Minnesota and Wisconsin. Dubuque in relationship to Illinois positives, because the Illinois has CWD also there too. That's both states with all the black dots of being positive animals. You know, if we could tell which ones were coming from Wisconsin, you know, when they had a cheddar head in, it'd be a lot easier to eliminate animals that come from Wisconsin, but unfortunately they don't have that. Okay, so our total positives, we're at 46, 34 in Alameda County. And that sounds like a lot, but like I said, it's not going exponential, at least for right now. Clayton 6, Wayne, and Dubuque. Who can help stop or slow the CWD spread? Hunters, captive deer and elk breeders, taxidermists, wildlife rehabilitators. And I'll tell you at this point there too, the Department of Natural Resources does not allow wildlife rehabilitators to rehabilitate fawns anymore. You can imagine somebody from visiting Alameda County and finds this fawn abandoned, because a lot of times they're not abandoned, picks up this fawn, finds a rehabilitator in Blackhawk County at Waterloo, takes it to the facility. Their intentions are great. Trying to take care of this fawn, raise it up, and it has CWD, and they release it out in the wild in Grundy County. We just introduced CWD into Grundy County from that animal. Oh, but then the next fawn that comes in the pen, remember those prions that are right there? And the next fawn gets positive, and they take this one to Story County, Marshall County, and release it. You know, so that's, rehabilitators were not happy with this until I gave them this program. I said, look, our population is way more important than individual animals. So your intentions are good, but we cannot allow rehabilitation to spread this disease faster. So we're asking the rehabilitators to educate the public more of those fawns got way more of a chance of surviving by leaving it that the doe's going to come back on there. Yes, there can be a roadkill doe and those fawns are there, but that's kind of some life we have to live with, that let those fawns stay with those does. Agencies have a responsibility too. DNR, Department of Ag, county conservation boards, not to be moving live animals that could be infected to a penned zoo type displays or reintroductions into the wild of deer across Midwest or the United States. Hunting preserves and meat processors. You know, deer hunters have high expectations for deer in Iowa, but we're not going to have a deer like this behind every tree. So even if we had 10%, 20% less deer than we have out there, we have tremendous deer hunting in Iowa. But we may not be letting them all go to quite that big stuff in there. So what can you do to help out? Provide a sample. So especially those people around CWD areas and stuff there is what we're really asking for. We need to be able to get samples and test them. Hunters have been absolutely tremendous. I could count on this hand how many people have refused to give me a sample since we started back in 2012. They have been tremendous. They love the resource. They trust the DNR for what we're doing on this, and we need to be able to do whatever we can to stop or slow the disease. So we have them fill out a form here as far as their name, where they hunt, or where location they have the animals, which seasons they hunt, and contact information of how to get a hold of us to get samples. What else can you do? Come to public meetings. That was the public meeting in Clayton County when they had their first positive in Clayton County. And I'll tell you what, people come out of the woodwork when you have positive. You know, this is a great group. Thanks for coming. But if we had a positive in Marshall County, we'd have to have a different facility to be able to hold that meeting, because people are going to be really concerned, obviously so. And a lot of these people come to the meeting just like this, and they're ready to be mad about what the DNR, you better not do what Wisconsin did to try to eliminate the whole deer herd, you know, there. So we give our presentation and do the best we can with science and everything there and ask for the hunters and the public support of what we do. So attend the public meetings, get the information from us, the literature, science, and not the internet. You know, there's some good stuff out there, but there's also a bunch of stuff there that's not true, believe it or not. What else can you do? This is an important one. Mineral and feed piles on the ground are a source where all animals can come to one central location. So if you're putting feed or a mineral block out there, and obviously we know we can't hunt over those, but if you're putting it out there for supplement of some sort for deer, and this one is affected, and she has saliva going on this corn, and this one just ingested that, and this one ingested it, and this one ingested it, and then they disperse after the winter, you just helped transmit that disease quicker rather than from animal to animal and from the environment and the soil. Yes, they could get it from the soil, but that prion's out there in the woods down there, but here you're drawing all of them into one spot. So these mineral holes will be like this. We all know that they'll consume actually the soil itself to get those minerals that they desire in these holes. So you can imagine the feces, the urine, and the saliva that's in these places. And Wisconsin's done a study where they can find the prions in these holes like this, and then you're helping transmit the disease. So we're asking the public to voluntarily, we don't have the authority right now, to refrain from doing that. There's ways of putting rock in here, covering it back up, and seeding it back down to limit that access. You could put pallets with staking them down or something for a temporary covering up of those holes. What else can you do? Thinking about carcass movements and disposal. So somebody comes to Alameda County from Marshall County, and they're hunting deer in the CWD zone, and they bring their deer back here and they process it here, and they put the remains out on the landscape. That's a way that we can start CWD in a new location. So we want proper transport and carcass disposal. Up in northeast Iowa, we're providing these dumpsters in the CWD zone for at least the locals or ones that process locally can put their remains in here, and then we pay for it to get it into the landfill. And so keeping that in mind as far as taking deer outside of these CWD zones to new places in Iowa. And these are, again, just voluntary at this point. What else can you do? Report sick-looking deer to the DNR anywhere in Iowa that you would see them. We'll maybe talk on the phone of what kind of symptoms or what we're seeing. We're not going on wild deer chases where one's got a bum leg and it's hobbling around and it shows up every 5 days. You know, we can't go looking for a deer or something like that. See skin and bones, a deer that's not normal with its hips showing and ribs showing. We want to be notified on that so we can maybe do some investigation, do the testing on that, and help locate a disease, maybe something like this, prior to maybe from a hunter sample. Oh, and also, we ask for roadkill deer, but only in the CWD zones. We can't be doing roadkills all across Iowa. When we get those 15, we're kind of done, but don't call from Polk County, Des Moines, and even Marshall County. They'll get their 15 and stuff there. But the areas where Alameda, Clayton, and Wayne counties, we ask the public around there to point out roadkill animals to us. What else can you do? Keep hunting. If you hunt in an area where there's CWD, test your animal before processing and consuming. The lockers, we're working with them as far as when they have a deer comes in that's been tested, they may do the fresh cuts, package them individually with that deer with an ID number for that deer, and then they'll wait for the results to be able to release that out. Or if they have the material that's going to be ground, they'll hold that back, freeze it up till the samples come back there before they're mixing with other meat. If those are the ones that are sampled. Even in the summer, 90 degrees, a roadkill, you can wait 5 days, 10 days, and still get a good sample. Now, the technicians don't like going out on those so much because the deer starts getting bigger and everything on there. A little stinkier to get them, but those could be good samples. So in the wintertime, they can last. So you can cut the head off, just right at the spine and stuff there. As long as you don't cut real close here, just cut the neck off, leave a couple inches, keep the head in a cool place, you know, garage or whatever. We can do the samples there and make arrangements for that. 5 things the public can do. 5 things that you can do to help us out with this disease. Provide a sample, refrain from using mineral or feed piles, proper carcass disposal, report sick deer anywhere in Iowa, and keep hunting and remove excess and old deer. Some miscellaneous things I wanted to just throw in here. Colorado State University and Iowa State University are the two labs we use. We use two so we can split our samples going two ways rather than dumping 2,000 on Iowa State University. We can go two ways. Overnight ship to Colorado. Sometimes they can be, just as fast and stuff there too with that overnighting. Online test results, I told you about that. Check our website. We'll be updating that fairly soon here as far as new updates and some of the maps that we have on here. That will be your best source of information of finding contact information of people. And we have an email system where you can ask questions with the DNR too there if you need to for that. Whitetails Unlimited, Quality Deer Management, and Iowa Bow Hunting Association are all very strong supporters of the DNR and what we're doing to try to stop or slow the disease. Last slide I have here is this guy right here. He's going to have tremendous deer hunting for the rest of his life. Our concern is these kids and their grandkids to make sure that they have quality of not only hunting deer but be able to see deer, healthy looking deer in Iowa. So that's our goal, is way beyond 2 years or 3 years. If this buck is getting really big that I want to put up on the wall, we're thinking about the population and having our people of Iowa have quality of life of deer in Iowa. My biggest concern is Dubuque with an urban situation. Deer are hard enough to control this disease with a hunting going on there. They do hunt in Dubuque though. They have bow hunting going on. Tremendous thinking on their part to keep deer numbers low for shrubbery, vehicle accidents, and all the other things. But now we have a population that's somewhat maintained in there if they have the disease start right there. But if you had 2,000 acres and you don't allow hunting on that, and you have food sources that are really gathering a lot of deer, then I'd have a concern that you need to maybe help cull deer or find ways that we can help get some deer removed so we don't have a high population with the disease. Not concerned about what you need to do on your land and stuff there, as long as you're not, like I say, putting mineral or something that they're all noses go in the same spot. Population-wise, the does are the key to how many deer you're going to have, so that's definitely the part of what they've been doing on there. I'm not sure if Dubuque does, but some of the cities offer an incentive where if you kill 6 does, you're in for a drawing or you're in for a buck license to help keep some of those bucks out there too. We'll be working very closely with the city of Dubuque this year to try to get everybody's sample. I don't know if it'll be mandatory or not, but do a lot more of the sampling of those city deer to see what we've got going on there. I'm hoping that deer just crossed the river and got thumped by a car and we don't have others that are infected over there. But even when we're in CWD zone areas, this is our message to the public. Do whatever you can do to help stop or slow this disease. Now there's times when you've shot a doe, she's down in a gully, I can't get this deer out without field dressing it. Field dress it there, because if she's positive, she's already left some in the environment, some is there. That gut pile that's there is not as significant as a mineral lick or transporting this deer to a whole nother county and putting it out on the landscape. And then I'm not real concerned about carcass disposal on the landscape in Marshall County right now until we had CWD closer. Whether it's Marshall or Story, that's about the safest place when you look at this map. You know, we got it all around the perimeters and you're in the central part of Iowa. It could pop up anywhere, but our most concerns are in the zone areas there of spreading. But like I say, if she's positive, she's already left some prions, you can gut the animal there. But some people do take them to the dumpster and gut the animal and put it right into our dumpster in the zones. And I attended the Iowa Society of Solid Waste Organizations meeting that they had their state conference last wintertime and gave the presentation similar to this, asking for their help and cooperation for, you have publicly or county-owned type landfills, you have privately ones, you have different regulations, you have different processes. Some of them, the intentions are good. I'll tell this one quickly. We had to hunt in Alameda County. I told them landfill's the best place for remains. 2 guys took carcasses to Lynn County landfill, and they said, who the hell told you to bring a carcass, there to here? Terry Hainfield. So I got a phone call. They had a process. They wanted it at the end of the day so they could cover it. They wanted paperwork to know what they were dealing with, and they would take them. Blackhawk County does not take carcasses. So we're working with these, trying to make it more manageable with this disease such that people don't have too much red tape. They say, heck with this, and throw a carcass in the road ditch, somewhere to spread the disease more, and we have more problems. So we're not doing a health check. We are not a health organization saying, yep, that deer is clean and pure and you got no problem with it. We're saying it was not detected in those deer that when we do the testing with them. So we can't do a health check of every deer, if that's kind of what you're asking. So far, we've been able to handle anybody that's requested a test from us, but we're at the point right now where we may have to turn you down, and not turn you down, but send you to do it privately with your own funds to a lab on your own, is where we're at. For the DNR, when we have a contract of thousands, they're $20, $25, but it could be $35 or $40 for a public to do a deer sample on that. One of the hang-ups we're finding right now is that a lot of the labs rightly are asking that a professional pull the sample, because if you send salivary gland to them, they can't do anything with it, and then what do you do with your deer? So they want the right sample. Those are some of the things that we are working on right now to go through the landfilling, the household waste to sampling and everything to give you the best options that you can out there. Again, this is your personal decision of when to test and when not to test. And when you're in an area where there's not CWD, not overly concerned with that, but if you're in areas with CWD, following CDC's recommendation to sample those deer and have them tested before you process and consume. But they're not saying that outside of the areas where it's not known to be, even though it could be. And then you also got to make your personal decisions that there's never been any proof of any human contracting this disease. It could cross over sometime, and that's why we're monitoring and giving you the best advice. When we get a call on a target deer, that's one that's showing some sort of symptoms of something's wrong, or it just died unnaturally, there too. And so what we do is we take that CWD test on those animals there and send that in. We don't always analyze a deer to figure out it was pneumonia is actually what killed that deer, because there's a lot of other things. So all those target deer, I'm pretty sure I'm accurate in saying we have not had a positive. Yes, we have not had a positive with a target animal, and we've done a couple hundred, if not more, of what we are suspicious looking, sick looking deer, but it's other things, infections. We'd really like to know why that deer died. So right now, this is a great time to introduce Rachel Rudin, who is our absolutely freshly new hire for the Department of Natural Resources. She's our new state wildlife vet who will be located at the Iowa State University Vet Lab. And she will be helping guide us, when do we take the whole carcass to Iowa State University and do a full necropsy? And then the other question a lot of times comes up, well, if I see a sick deer, should I shoot it and then call you? You shoot what you can afford. Because if it's got great big antlers, and you're like, yeah, that one kind of was looking a little sick, I kind of put him down. Can I keep the antlers? No, that's not going to fly. So you have to call a DNR first. That's exactly right. So we don't give you permission just to shoot a sick-looking deer. No, we'll give recommendations on the website, hopefully by hunting seasons here, to have something. If we have something concrete that this is a lab that will take your deer and the process on that. Right now we're still going with, we can take everybody's sample, but if we get to that point, we will have an alternative for you. But for right now, we want to take the sample so we get the right tissue, and then also, you obviously would do. And then also, if the lab will only take it if it's a professional taken, like a vet or something there, we want to have that kind of laid out and lined up for you. If it is in proximity to Davis County or Wayne County, I would say probably be testing your animals, but again, that's each individual hunter's tests and choices there to make of what they wanted to go through and everything. The other part where we have check stations at our CWD locations, not at all hours, but certain ones that are posted in the hunting regulations, where people can bring a deer to a check station type of place, usually in a town, fire station, or someplace, a fairgrounds or something like that we'll have. And the county conservation boards are helping us with those, and they can bring a deer into there to have somebody sample it, especially if you're traveling. So if you're traveling down to southern Iowa and traveling out, you can go get that sample done before you go out and stuff there too. And we have roving crews that work the field, going from farm to farm of people, and it's, like I said, tremendous support by the hunters. I've gone over my time. I appreciate everybody, and I will stick around for a little while if you have some other comments or questions, but thanks for coming.